One of the true delights of the garden is attracting pollinators. Today we explore the fascinating world of monarchs and how to make them feel at home in our garden. You won't want to miss it, so stay tuned as we garden smart.
These moments of beauty and relaxation are brought to you by Proven Winners Flowering Shrubs. Our goal is to leave you free to just enjoy your garden. Proven Winners Flowering Shrubs can be found at local garden centers across the country.
Power Planter's garden drill augers are designed to help you tackle the digging jobs in your garden or yard. Dig through hard soil to assist in planting trees, shrubs, and annuals. Power Planter's heavy-duty augers, made for professional landscapers and home gardeners alike.
DRAM has been providing gardeners with professional equipment for over 80 years. DRAM products feature 9 water patterns and are designed to nurture your plants with a shower of rain. DRAM for lawn and garden, available at garden centers near you.
The Jaguar F-Pace.
Pollinator gardens are both beautiful and serve to attract wildlife. A particularly fascinating pollinator is the regal monarch, who travels thousands of miles each year from Canada to Mexico, finding their beloved milkweed along the way to deposit their eggs, giving rise to the next generation. Today we meet with Andy Davis, a wildlife ecologist at the University of Georgia, who's been fascinated with monarchs his entire life. To learn from him what we can do as gardeners to encourage pollinators and help sustain the monarchs for their long journey. Dr. Davis, thanks so much for joining us. Welcome to the show.
All right, thank you for having me.
So we've done many shows on pollinators, but we've not yet spoken to an expert in butterflies, and I'm fascinated to have this conversation with you. You're someone who's been passionate about monarchs and butterflies, frogs, beetles, many things, but you've studied butterflies for a long time, and I just want to ask you, what sparked your interest in this passion in butterflies?
Well, that's a great question. You know, I kind of started my career as an ornithologist of all things, and I studied bird migrations way up north in Canada. And when I came down here to the States to work, I realized that the monarch butterflies have a very similar migration system that birds do, where they have a long distance journey in the fall to selected wintering sites in Mexico, and then they come back north again in the spring. And that kind of journey to me kind of fascinated me, and it sort of started me on my own journey to study the monarch butterfly migration, which is kind of where a lot of my expertise is in these days. As you said, I do study a lot of critters, but I've been studying the monarch butterflies for the longest.
Well, speaking of monarchs, let's talk a little bit about the life cycle of the monarch butterfly.
Well, I just happen to have one right here.
Oh, wow.
And this is a monarch butterfly, and this is a butterfly that lays its eggs only on one type of plant, the milkweed plant, which is in the genus Asclepias. And there are about 100 different species of milkweeds in North America. This monarch butterfly will lay her eggs on the milkweed plant. The eggs will hatch, turn into little caterpillars, and the caterpillars will stay on the plant, eat the plant until they develop into a pupae, and then after they're done transforming, they turn into the adult butterfly and then fly away.
And so do I understand correctly that monarch, she'll lay, what, 300 to 500 eggs?
At least, yes.
And just one egg per leaf on the Asclepias?
Well, that's a good question. If there's a lot of milkweed in the area, she'll kind of lay one egg and then sort of fly off and lay another egg 100 yards away. If there's not as much milkweed in an area, then she'll kind of lay a lot of eggs on one plant. That's not really the greatest thing, because sometimes those eggs they'll start to, when they become caterpillars, they'll start to crowd each other out. Okay. So in theory, she wants to lay one egg per plant. So that way there's enough milkweed resource for that one offspring.
And that process must take, what, days or weeks?
So from egg to adulthood, it's about a month.
Okay.
It's very temperature dependent, so it depends on where you live in the country, what the temperature is, what the season is. But in general, it's about a month. Yeah.
And so this is the only plant that the caterpillar wants to eat, the monarch caterpillar, right?
That's right. Every butterfly has its own specific host plant. The monarch butterflies only use milkweeds.
So as gardeners, if we want to help the monarchs out and plant some Asclepias in our garden, we can't just plant any milkweed, right?
Yeah, that's a good point, because there's 100 different species of milkweed in North America, all native. If you go to your local garden center, sometimes what you'll find is a non-native species of milkweed that's non-native to your area. There's some that are being brought up from Central America, some coming from Africa now, and you have to make sure you're getting a native species for your garden, because the monarchs have evolved to live with those native species. The non-native milkweeds, they can actually interfere with the monarch's migration because they stay in leaf longer than they should, and that actually confuses the monarchs and tells them it's not time to migrate when it actually is.
I know that you study a lot of fascinating things, and
Yes.
one of the more interesting aspects of your education and your research is with parasites that also affect these insects. And I know that there's an issue with the non-native milkweed that's related to parasite populations that affect monarchs.
There is a parasite that lives on monarchs. It's probably a naturally evolved parasite. All monarch populations around the world have this parasite to some degree. In places where they don't migrate, like in South Florida, their parasite levels are really, really high. And we think that the migration itself actually cleanses the entire population of diseased individuals. Because it's such a long distance flight, any butterfly that actually tries to migrate while they have this parasite, they simply perish during the journey. And so what that does is it cleanses the population every year. And so that's why we think that migratory populations, the migration itself, is actually a really good thing for the population, because it keeps the population healthy and free of diseases. If you have this non-native milkweed though, and if you're convincing monarchs to not migrate or prolong their breeding phase, then you're actually helping the parasite to actually replicate more, and that can cause some further damage to the monarch population.
Well, let's talk about the migration, because this is something that is also really, really fascinating to me.
Yeah.
That a guy that small
Yes.
travels how many miles?
Oh, it's at least 3,000 miles depending on where they start from. So they can
Wow.
they can fly from all the way as far north as Canada, and travel all the way through the States, through northern Mexico, until they reach their wintering sites in the mountains of central Mexico. And that journey is probably one of the most fascinating things of this butterfly. Most other butterfly species that we have in North America don't do that at all. The monarch butterfly travels all the way down to Mexico to survive the winter.
Okay.
And they hang out in Mexico. They spend their months on trees down there. They wait until it's spring, and then they re-migrate north again. As they're migrating north again, by that time they're like 7 months old. They're really geriatric for a butterfly. And they're laying eggs as they migrate north, and then they perish. But then those eggs hatch, and then once those offspring turn into adults, they then continue the migration northward. And that continues. There's like 2 or 3 generations moving northward in the spring, where they sort of recolonize the entire North American breeding range. But in the fall, it's that one long distance flight that takes 2 months, where the entire generation attempts to make it to Mexico. Only really the select few hardy ones ever do reach their wintering colonies. And those are the ones that are surviving to pass on their genes to the next generation.
So, Dr. Davis, are there things that as gardeners that we can do to help the monarchs out with their journey?
So as gardeners, one thing that you can do is try to help the monarchs during that journey north, the spring migration. Have some native milkweeds, especially if you live along the migration flyway going north. Texas, Arkansas, places like that. Those monarchs there really, really need to have access to ample native milkweed in order for that for the population to rebuild itself every year. During the fall migration, the monarchs don't really need milkweed at all. They really need nectar sources. And so one of the things you can do as a gardener is to ensure that there's plenty of flowering plants in the fall when the monarchs are timed to go through your particular state.
Having things like zinnia, cosmos,
Yes,
you know.
those are all good. Goldenrod is a great plant.
Right.
It's a plant that a lot of people don't put in their garden specifically, but if you have a field in back of your house, you can sort of plant your goldenrod back there. It's actually a really, really good plant for not just monarchs, but a lot of other insect species. Keep the butterflies happy in the fall by providing them with lots of sort of nectar sources. That's a great word of advice.
Monarchs are such beautiful creatures, and of course it's just that iconic orange and black that everyone knows. I want you to talk a little bit about the anatomy of the butterfly, like how do we tell the males from the females,
Yeah.
and talk a little bit about the patterning.
Sure. You know, males and females look a little bit different. It takes a trained eye. If you just see them from a distance on your flower, then you won't really see the difference. But if you have them up close, perhaps if you caught one of them for a research project, or if you have them in your hand, you can actually see the difference. This is a female monarch. You can tell because the females have thicker black pigmentation on their wing veins. And the females also are missing two little spots on their hind wings. It's very subtle, and you have to see the butterflies up close. So there are some differences between males and females. But one of the things that's really fascinating to me about the wings themselves is that I was actually just part of a team of researchers who just published a really cool project showing how the wing colors themselves, the white spots in particular, happen to be really, really important for the fall migration. My team and I found that the size of these little white spots all along the edge of their fore and hind wings seem to be really important for aerodynamic purposes. They actually affect the aerodynamics of the wings as they're flying through the air because of the cooling effect that the white actually has for the butterflies. And so it's really a fascinating study. And so we're only just now realizing the importance of these colors for actually helping the butterflies for that long distance migration.
Well, the orange, does that help protect them from certain predators?
Yes, the orange color itself has long been known as a signal to tell predators not to eat them, because the milkweed plants have a toxin inside them. The monarch caterpillars, when they eat the milkweeds, they actually ingest that toxin, and it stays with them throughout most of their life. And that actually makes the butterflies themselves toxic to predators.
Well, I've learned so much from you. What a fascinating conversation. Dr. Davis, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you again for having me.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right.
World-renowned gardener Jim Gibbs has a wealth of knowledge on designing gardens for pollinators. Let's catch up with him and take a look at the incredible pollinator garden he's built to aid the monarchs on their migration. Jim, thanks so much for joining us. It's always a pleasure to see you, sir.
Thank you, Eric. Great to see you again.
Thank you. Well, today we're talking about a topic that's near and dear to my heart and the heart of so many gardeners, which is pollinators and what we need to do to attract them into the garden. And thinking about the garden, you know, in a cyclical sense. So throughout the course of the year, how do we plan a garden to attract, you know, the bees and butterflies, and then of course eventually the birds that are going to come in later and eat all those seeds. So there's a lot of thought that we can put into structuring the garden in such a way to where we gain the advantage of all of these different wonderful pieces of wildlife.
Well, of course, what I had to do was plan, like you were saying, the seeds that we would be planting to attract the birds into the garden. And then we had to decide on what kind of seeds we would be using. And of course, we wanted the flowers to be for color, but mainly we wanted to attract the pollinators, which of course were the butterflies and the bees. And of course, the wildflower seeds attract thousands of birds into the gardens.
Let's talk about some of the insects and birds that you have in your garden that you're able to attract every year.
Well, of course, the The butterflies, there are 20 species of butterflies that are here at all times. Now we have the bees, and I love honeybees. We have beehives and producing the honey, so the bees are everywhere. And then we have the other kind of bees also. And these pollinators, of course, they feed on the flowers to get the nectar and the pollen. And they use the nectar for their nourishment, and then the pollen is usually transferred on their feet or their legs or in their mouth from one flower to the other to pollinate all of the flowers that are here. But as you know, the pollinators, our population is going down.
Right,
It's
right.
decreasing, not increasing, which concerns me greatly. And of course, we want to build a habitat for the gardens that would attract more and more butterflies and bees. Don't forget too, Gibbs Gardens has all of these different floral gardens, color fest we call them, and they are attracting bees, butterflies, insects, birds to the garden. So this was one big, huge addition in one place of 15 acres to do that.
And the plight of the pollinator, as you said, it's so critically important, because even beyond flowers, you know, that would be ornamental, without pollinators, there's no food. Thinking about how do we create habitats for pollinators, how do we help rebuild these populations, it's important just for the survival of humanity.
You're correct, very much so.
So you talked about the seeds that you're looking at from a standpoint of planning a good pollinator garden.
I work with Garrett Seed Company, and we've designed a pollinator mix wildflower seed mix.
Okay.
What he does is mix 9 varieties of perennial flowers. So in the mix we have, of course, 4 kinds of coreopsis varieties. Those are all in yellow colors, beautiful, and they make a big display. The lance leaf coreopsis is the first to bloom in the spring, followed by the plains coreopsis. And then you're going to have the narrow leaf sunflowers that would be blooming, as well as the bee balm, which is the spotted bee balm, black-eyed Susans, coneflowers are great, and you're going to have also burr marigolds that work well. So we wanted to design, starting in April, every 3 or 4 weeks, we would have new flowers blooming for the beauty of them and to attract the pollinators. Then you go into the next month, From April through November, 8 months, we have all these flowers blooming, and we have most all of the bees and butterflies here, except for the monarch. As you know, they're coming in as they travel north. They're going to come through North Georgia and visit us, and then when they're returning from the north, coming back south, they visit us again. And so we have those coming through. Of course, some of my favorites as a child was the large yellow tiger swallowtail.
Oh, yeah.
And the large eastern black swallowtail. They're big and showy.
Right.
And the thing about them, they are here for 5 months and stay here during that time. And they make a big show. Children love them.
Oh, sure.
And the families love them too. The monarchs are only here about 2 weeks in the spring and 2 to 3 weeks in the fall. So that makes a difference there.
Yeah, and having these large plots for pollinators, we think about the monarch, that's a very, very long trip that they're making. And so it's super important that there are places for them to pause and refuel so that they can make the journey. And as we see big crops of pollinators maybe disappearing, or there being fewer and fewer for these butterflies to refuel with, that could also impact their population.
One thing a lot of people don't realize, butterflies don't drink water.
Right.
And they don't sleep at night. They rest their eyes at night. And they're always leaving the meadow, going over to the shrubs and the trees, usually to hang there and rest. Now, they receive the water through the nectar, which also nourishes them. And then, of course, you've got the pollen they're moving with their feet and hands. We have perennial seed that I just mentioned, but we have annual wildflower seed, and we have to plant that every year. Now, what we do is in November, the 15th of November, we plant larkspur, and red poppies, and that will be blooming in the spring during the months of April and May. Now the larkspur has beautiful lavender, blue, purple,
Right.
pink, and white flowers, and the red poppies are, of course, the monarchs can see them from up above,
Right.
and the color draws them down, and they get the nectar and all from those flowers. In April, we are planting zinnias, and the butterflies love zinnias. And not only that, the ladies love to cut the flowers, so they're great in your garden. So with the zinnias, we plant those in May. We have 10 groups that we plant, but the largest ones are the California giants, which have 3 to 4 inch size blooms.
Right.
And then we have the lilliput, which are the little dwarf zinnias, and they're multicolored also, and they're great for cut flowers. So for that, we're using the zinnias to carry us with flowers from usually June all the way through November. Then the third annual seed we plant is cosmos. And the cosmos is planted on July the 15th to August 1. And what the cosmos does is it flowers all during the months of September, October, and November. And the sulfurous cosmos is bright yellow and orange, and it attracts the monarchs and the other butterflies. So masses of monarchs will flutter down. You'll see them like orange and yellow clouds coming down into the fields to get the nectar and the pollen. Then you have, of course, the pink flowers, 3 shades of pink. You have the red flower and the white flower, and that gives us a lot of color.
Absolutely. Yeah, so from a maintenance standpoint, it may seem like a lot, but once it's established, and if we're just thinking about it in terms of when we might need to put some annuals out and having a nice foundation of perennials, it's kind of a self-sustaining garden, right?
It definitely is. We do have to plant the annual seed for those annual wildflowers. But other than that, it's very low maintenance, like you're saying.
Right.
You just let it be wild.
I think it's worth pointing out too, Jim, that not all of us have 15 acres for our pollinators, but so many of these plants, cosmos, zinnia, even of course all these perennials, they do great in containers as well.
They do. If you plant those in container with other plants, they will bloom for many, many months, and all you do is deadhead them to keep them blooming. So that works out well for containers.
Absolutely, and it's such a rewarding way to garden, having all of these different elements of wildlife that are taking advantage of it, and knowing that we're doing something great for the pollinators too.
I feel good about what I'm doing.
No doubt, you should.
Yeah.
Jim, it's always a pleasure spending the day with you. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Eric. I enjoy meeting with you.
Yes, sir. Each week we travel the country north to south, east to west, visiting some of the most exciting gardens, as well as talking to industry horticulturalists about design principles, new plants, and also how you can be most successful with your home gardens. We also love answering your gardening questions, so visit us on the web at GardenSMART.com.
These moments of beauty and relaxation are brought to you by Proven Winners Flowering Shrubs. Our goal is to leave you free to just enjoy your garden. Proven Winners Flowering Shrubs can be found at local garden centers across the country.
Power Planter's garden drill augers are designed to help you tackle the digging jobs in your garden or yard. Dig through hard soil to assist in planting trees, shrubs, and annuals. Power Planter's heavy-duty augers, made for professional landscapers and home gardeners alike.
DRAM has been providing gardeners with professional equipment for over 80 years. DRAM products feature 9 water patterns and are designed to nurture your plants with a shower of rain. DRAM for lawn and garden, available at garden centers near you.
The Jaguar F-Pace.
The symbiosis between pollinators and the flowers they are attracted to is truly fascinating, and learning how to garden with them in mind makes everything just that much more fun. If you have questions about anything you've seen, visit us on the web at GardenSMART.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram. And remember, even if you're a master gardener, there's always more to learn. So join us next week for more great gardening tips and ideas as we garden smart.